Thank you. What I want to talk about today is innovation and why companies have it really tough time in innovating. Why, for larger companies that are successful, and we had the examples this morning too, like Kodak, it's so hard to really innovate, and then in the end they fail, and they fail as an entire company. Now, one of the things that we see a lot is that we talk about disruptive innovation, and let's first start talking about that. So what is disruptive innovation? Well, I like to take things simple and define disruptive innovation as innovation that changes the rules of the game. So you're in a business, and then a certain innovation, a certain new technology, or a certain new business model changes the rules of the game. Easiest example that we all know is Uber. They changed the rules of the game. You don't need taxis anymore or taxi drivers on your playlist to be a taxi company. So they changed the rules of the game. What happens when you change the rules of the game is that your assets and competences become irrelevant or become worthless. So you have built up a company, you have assets, but because the rules of the game change, they become worthless. And you have competence, you learned a lot, and now due to a change of the rules, those competences become worthless or useless. Let me tell you about an example that I experienced myself. I was an advisor to a travel company in the Netherlands in the 1990s, and they were really successful. They grew very fast, and they were adding new offices almost every week to their network. What they did is they had a very clear vision. Their vision was, to be successful, we need to be as close to the customers as possible. And they built an entire machine, an organization to do that. So they were the best. They had a very good process in finding the best companies that they could acquire to add new offices to their network. So, because they grew by acquisitions. So they had to find companies and then had to integrate them. They were very good in finding them, and they were even better in integrating them. They had a good process that when they had acquired a company, on Friday evening, the stores of that company would close the doors. On Monday morning, it would be the new company. And they were very proud of that. And they built this machinery over a long time, and it made them successful. Now what happened? The internet came. And when the internet came, that changed the rules of the game. Because now, to be close to the customers, they didn't need offices anymore. Via the internet, they could build a website and be at the customer right away. So what that meant for them is that their current assets and current competences became worthless or useless or worth less, at least. To give you an example about that, think about the machine that they built to integrate companies, acquired companies into their bigger company. They didn't need it anymore. The people that had the competences to do that, they basically were on the brink of losing their career because they built a career on those competences and now might not be needed anymore. Take, for example, the guy that was the great deal maker for this company, that really could find the best companies to acquire, make a good deal. He grew almost to board level because that was very important according to the old rules of the game. But now, his competence was not needed anymore. So what it means, and we heard this morning that for many larger organizations, what is the biggest hurdle to become more innovative? It's the people. Well, it has to do with this fact. People made their career according to the old rules of the game, and if they can't use those competences for the new rules of the game, they don't know what to do. That's why they have a hard time to innovate. And also for the assets, it's very hard. Take the same example. So this very successful travel company, they didn't invest in a website very fast. Why? Well, they knew that if they would build a website, if they would only sell one travel via that website, make one transaction via the website, it would mean that they would earn less on the companies that they acquired yesterday or the week before. So it would mean that if they invested in the web presence, they had to write off the investments they did the previous months directly. So no CFO is willing to do that. It's really hard for a CFO to do that. So what did they do? What do you think? They thought, well, let's wait. Maybe the internet goes over again. It will go away again. That's what big companies do. They hope it will take some time. They hope that it will be over again. But in many cases, that's not. So that's why disruptive innovation is so dangerous. It's because at the company level, it means that your assets become worthless, and your competences become worthless. It also means at the individual level, that for people, they lose their career. Now, many innovations are technology-driven, and let me explain a bit about technology, because that's also hard. Because we have to assess whether a new technology would be valuable for us and whether it would be a success. And well, let me show you some examples that this is a hard thing to do for everybody, even for the best experts. Edison, of course, was a very famous guy, and very talented, but he made a wrong assumption here, or a wrong assessment of the technology. That's very nice, because I like to use my own computer everywhere I go for presentations. This one, well, I started doing computer programming on digital computers. Really nice, but they're gone now. And now you have to think about that if you talk about 1977, what was a computer then is less computing power than probably your washing machine at home now. So in that sense, we have tens of them, hundreds of them. And the last one, I was already on the slide of the other Dutch presenter this morning. The market of 5 computers. I would like to add something to this, because not a lot of people know, IBM is a very serious company. It's not like Thomas Watson was there saying, 5 computers. No. This was based on rigid research. IBM sent out researchers across the globe to make an inventory of all calculations that were done every day. So they had a global inventory of all calculations done in the entire day. And then they calculated the processing power needed to do those calculations and divided it by the computer power, the processing power of their computer, and it was a number a bit less than 5. So with 5 computers, you could do all calculations on the entire globe. That's why they said it's 5. Now, what happens, and this is very important to see, is that as soon as you give people certain capabilities, it creates new demand. So that's why it's so hard, in this case, for example, to find out what would be a successful technology. Because if you give the technology to people, it will create new demand. Because we cannot do market research for these kind of technologies, because people can't imagine what it would bring them. So the only way to go there is to just give it away, or set it out in the market and see and study. It's like Ford said. If he would have done market research, people would have asked for faster horses. If you're in the world of horses, you can't imagine a new car. And then there's another reason. If you look at technology and how technology evolves, what we see is many technologies start out as an inferior technology to the current technology, if you look at it from the perspective of the current way of using it. And what happens is that technologies find a new way, another application domain, where they are more valuable, and then grow in that domain, and then attack us in the traditional domain. Let me give an example of that. In the hard disk industry, has been studied a lot by Harvard Business School. They've done a lot of research in the hard disk industry, because it's a very interesting industry. It's from generation to generation. Every time over, only a few companies survived, and all the others went broke. They didn't see the next generation of technology coming. And that's interesting, of course, because these are all bright engineers. How come they don't see that coming up? One of the cases that they studied most is the transition from 5.25-inch hard disk to 3.5-inch hard disk. It was like the second half of the 80s, the beginning of the 1990s. I remember very well, because I was building my own computers that time. Now, why didn't they see that? So some engineers, the industry was 5.25-inch. Then some engineers said, we can make a 3.5-inch drive. But this 3.5-inch drive was only 10 megabyte. And at that time, the 5.25 was 20 megabyte. And what the research shows is that the entire industry got stuck into the current technology. The salespersons of the hard disk industry manufacturers didn't want to sell the small disk because they were telling their clients already for half a year, next year I'll have a 30 megabyte disk. Yes, it was 20. They said, next year I can deliver you a 30 megabyte disk. They thought it would not be a good idea to now come up with, oh, I also have one of 10 megabytes. It wasn't a good story for them. So the salesperson didn't sell it. They don't tell. And then if they did, the clients, the customers, the computer manufacturers, IBM, HP, etc., they basically said, well, you know, in our design, we've already made room for a 5.25-inch drive. Why would we buy for a smaller one? So basically, the entire industry was stuck in the current technology. Now, what happened is that Compaq came to the stage. And Compaq was manufacturing the first portable computers. I had one. It was like a sewing machine, 13 kilograms, real tube, monochrome, and 2 floppy drives of 1.44 megabyte. For Compaq was building the next generation of portable computers. For them, a smaller disk, 3.5 megabytes. 10 megabytes was more than the 2 times 1.44, was really good. So they bought all drives they could get. And what happens then is something that we see a lot in technology development. It means that a technology, and that's what's called technology speciation, a technology finds a different area, in this case mobile, where not the size of the, not the disk space was important, but more the size was important. And then it grows in that domain. And what happens then is that, of course, the 5.25 industry was already a mature industry, so they had small margins, where the 3.5-inch industry was new and Compaq paid everything for it. They had big margins, and so it meant that the 3.5-inch drive computer disk manufacturers could spend more money on R&D, and in no time they had 30 megabytes on the small disk. And then it was too late for the traditional companies, for the 5.25-inch, to get into that space too. So they lost. So what we see here is that companies get stuck in their current technology, and because they don't see what's coming up, and that it also has to do with the assets and capabilities that you can't use in a new situation. I'm going to be very fast now. Then there's another thing in organizations, and it's the corporate immune system. So the corporate immune system tries to keep things as it is. It's important to have that because you need it to run a company. And it's for keeping idiots from bringing your company down. Whether it be a salesperson selling something that you can't deliver and then getting a claim for him from your customer, or a product designer making a product that you can't make. Now, the problem with the corporate immune system is that it sees innovators as idiots. So for innovators, it's very hard to innovate if you're controlled. Yes. So next week, for example, I also try to innovate KPMG. I have my yearly plan discussion with the manager, and I'm going to say that I would like to have at least 3 compliance complaints. If I don't have compliance complaints, I didn't push the boundaries enough because I try to innovate, which means that I have to fight the corporate immune system. Yeah? So we need that. And what I want to tell you about it is that if you look at innovation and why can't we be innovative, it's because we have one set of rules for everything. And if you want to be innovative, you should have 2 sets of rules. One set of rules for exploitation, because you need to have that machine running. It's what makes the current revenue. It's what keeps your company alive. So you need that set of rules, but you need a different set of rules for innovation, where there's more room for experimentation, where people can try out new things directly without testing it a lot, etc. So what can you do to make it work? Well, I think one is, reflecting to the last point, creating room for innovation. If there's no room for innovation, if you're really very tightly controlled organization, innovation cannot happen. Second is, try out new technologies. You're never going to learn about technology by looking at it or reading about it. You only are going to discover what it really can offer by trying it out. I think also, don't do it alone. More and more innovations are based on collaboration in organizations. And even more, you might be blinded by the current way of the industry. So try to involve other persons. And that would also be my almost last point. Get younger people into your innovation team, because they are not blinded by the current way of working. They might see other opportunities that you might not see, and they might come up with the best ideas. So that would lead me to my final recommendation. Innovation, although many people think it's about that creative idea, that eureka moment that you might have, I think innovation, it starts with that, and ideas are important, but then it's just about doing it. And of course, I really value you all here today listening about it, but tomorrow you start doing it. Köszönöm.